Welcome back to Crawford-Clark Close-Up's James Bond retrospective reviews in the lead-up to the 25th James Bond film coming in April 2020. We've arrived already at the 007th video in this retrospective, and to continue our look back over the Sean Connery entries in the canon, we turn to 1971's Christmas release, Diamonds Are Forever. In the fall of 1966, Connery, having played Bond over 5 films, beginning with 1962's Dr. No up to 1967's You Only Live Twice, repeatedly told journalists on set that Twice would be his final entry in the series. The onus had then been on the producers and United Artists to quickly find Connery's successor. We'll soon arrive at our review of George Lazenby's only Bond outing on Her Majesty's Secret Service, but we know that Connery was offered a grander salary to return to the fold to film his 6th Bond, Diamonds Are Forever, in 1971, following Lazenby's swift departure from the role. With Majesty's director Peter Hunt deciding not to helm the 7th Bond, Broccoli and Saltzman turned to Goldfinger director Guy Hamilton, who agreed to return to the series after a 6-year break, and the idea was definitely to bring a lighter tone back to the series following the previous film's sombre conclusion. With this adaptation of the 4th Fleming novel, the producers wanted to go back to the flair and bombast of Goldfinger, one of the most successful of the films up to that point, and that meant getting Connery to return and Shirley Bassey to come back to sing the risque title song. Written by Don Black and John Barry, Diamonds Are Forever, with its suggestive lyrics, was a return to the classic Bond sound, and John Barry later remarked how the song was universally praised by all the crew working on the film, bar producer Harry Saltzman, who Barry passed off as being tone-deaf. Clearly no animosity there. There's a lot that could be said in the positive and negative camps about Diamonds Are Forever, but what is inarguable is the contribution to the humour-filled script from, at the time, up-and-coming 27-year-old writer Tom Mankiewicz. Mankiewicz would take on writing duties for the second draft of Diamonds Are Forever, and the producers were very keen on bringing the American influence to proceedings, with a great deal of the film being set in America, by bringing on board an American writer with a strong command of the English idiom. The end result, if nothing else, makes for one of the most unique sounding of all the Bonds, with one sparkling quip laced into the script after another. Even Connery himself recalled on meeting personally with Mankiewicz, looking over the script and claiming it was one of the best that he'd seen on the series. Before filming began on Diamonds, and before Connery had agreed to sign on to play 007 once again, in the pursuit to make Bond more American, Burt Reynolds, 60s Batman Adam West, and psycho bit player John Gavin were the 3 frontrunners for the coveted role of what would have been the 3rd James Bond. The contract for John Gavin to play Bond was all signed on January the 29th, 1971, but the actor would gracefully step away from the role when Connery is convinced by his first Bond girl, Ursula Andress, and moreover a staggering salary of $1,250,000 to reprise the character for one final film. United Artists agreed to Connery's terms, offering him a 2-picture deal and agreeing that while one of those films would be Diamonds, the other could be a film of his choosing. That film became 1973's The Offence. Connery would later put his hefty salary into getting the Scottish International Education Trust Fund off the ground. Principal photography began precisely at 8:25 a.m. on Monday, April the 5th, 1971, in Las Vegas, with the Nevada desert doubling for South Africa. Putter Smith and Bruce Glover shot their first scenes as assassins Mr. Kidd and Mr. Wint. The original version of the scene involved Mr. Wint shoving a scorpion into Dr. Tynan's mouth, but the censors deemed this too shocking, so an alternate scene was shot where the scorpion is placed down the doctor's back. We open Diamonds with the traditional gun barrel before we open onto a ludicrous montage of seemingly Connery's Bond, voiceover only, punching and throwing people around the room and attempting to strangle a young woman called Marie with her own bikini to find the location of Blofeld. Whilst the majority of the story elements of On Her Majesty's Secret Service are largely ignored for this following film, it's interesting to note that Bond is starting the film hell-bent on locating Blofeld and trying to finish him once and for all, despite the fact that the whole sequence comes across like it's being played for laughs. There's awful dubbing from the outset with Cairo, and so many questions from this opening sequence alone, the most puzzling being, why would the man being made up to become a clone of Blofeld be carrying a gun in the mud bath? The sequence never seems to strike the right balance. It seems far too easy for Bond to dispatch of the clone Blofeld in the mud, and also Blofeld's henchmen, and it also comes across quite violent, with Bond throwing scalpels into the arms and chest of one of Blofeld's men, and a close-up injury of Blofeld's other guard with his fingers caught in a mousetrap that linger on screen. It's an admirable notion to bring Blofeld back to the forefront and have Bond seeking him out, but the execution of the sequence is without a doubt the weakest pre-title sequence in the series up to this point. The moment that ends the sequence, with Bond thinking he's killed the real Blofeld in the mud bath, is shot on June the 17th, 1971. From here we launch into Maurice Binder's title design, which creatively plays on the diamonds and the sparkle, but is made all the better for Shirley Bassey's rousing vocals on the memorable theme song. Let's talk about Bond himself. Despite accepting a healthy salary to reprise his most famous role in his career, Connery looks tired for much of the film and seems to be phoning it in for the money. Long gone is the brilliance of Connery in his first 3, nay 4 films in the series, replaced with an actor who looks a hell of a lot older than he did even 4 years earlier on You Only Live Twice. That said, Connery's Bond gets to do a lot this time around with Mankiewicz's script, and there are flourishes of surprising gold thrown into the mix. Not just the cracking dialogue, I'm afraid you've caught me with more than my hands up, and Bond as Peter Franks reacting to Tiffany's exclamation that she's just killed James Bond by saying, well, it just proves no one's indestructible, but also in excellent individual scenes like Bond getting constantly put down by Bernard Lee's grizzled M, unimpressed by Bond's cavalier attitude to life, as well as great action sequences including Bond and the real Peter Franks' fight in the lift on the way to Tiffany's apartment, and to top it all off, something that's so throwaway and fills the screen for barely 10 seconds, but works all the same as one of Bond's most ingenious disguises, when he pretends to be a kissing couple outside Tiffany Case's apartment in Amsterdam when the real Peter Franks arrives. Whether Connery enjoyed acting in Diamonds, only the man himself really knows, but his cast members had nothing but praise for him. Willard White actor Jimmy Dean struck up a great friendship with Connery on set, and would later remark that his co-star was a consummate professional. It's Connery himself, however, who sums up his feelings about playing the most famous British secret agent aptly. I don't think a single other role changes a man quite as much as Bond. It's a cross, a privilege, a joke, a challenge, and as bloody intrusive as a nightmare. All the regulars are here for Bond's 7th mission, including the 3rd actor so far to play ally Felix Leiter, who's serviceable to the plot, but by no means a memorable incarnation of the character. And it's sad to say that Lois Maxwell's Moneypenny, despite getting out from behind her desk and meeting Bond out in the field, gets less than 30 seconds of screen time. The shortest screen time ever for the character in the series, perhaps? Also back is the ever-reliable Q, whose best gadget for Bond this time around is voice-changing box, in order for Bond to trick Blofeld later in the film by posing as Bert Saxby. It's not up there with his best contributions to the series, but it's always a joy to see Desmond Llewellyn pop up in these films. What Bond film is complete without the requisite bevy of Bond ladies, and Diamonds has a fair few, the lead of which is Tiffany Case, played by Jill St. John, who, whilst initially seems quite resourceful to Bond's mission, supplying him with all the right connections, quickly resorts to the part of bumbling idiot after being taken by Blofeld to his oil rig base for the film's disappointing climax. St. John was originally going to play the smaller, fated character Plenty O'Toole in the script when John Gavin was temporarily signed up to play Bond, but when Connery agreed to return, Guy Hamilton, who was particularly enamoured with St. John, strove for her to be the film's leading lady. The Tiffany of the film is sadly nowhere near as beautiful or as engaging a character as she is in Fleming's novel, making her one of the most forgettable Bond girls in the film series. Tom Mankiewicz recommended Lana Wood for the role of Plenty O'Toole, named after your father perhaps, in the picture, and it's largely a thankless role. An extended sequence of Bond and Plenty in the casino dining area having dinner was cut from the finished film for adding nothing to the film. Wood was so short compared to Connery that she was instructed to stand on an apple box in heels at the craps table to match Connery's height. And in mid-May 1971, Connery's Bond comes face-to-face with Willard White's bodyguards, namely Bambi and Thumper, who embarrassingly almost best Bond in a fight before Bond tries to drown the pair in the pool and they're forced to tell Bond where Willard White is. On the whole, the Bond girl roles are particularly laboured this time around. The villains, on the other hand, are a decidedly mixed bag. Bruce Glover and Putter Smith's Mr. Wint and Mr. Kidd are the only two openly homosexual villains in the Bond canon to date, and they breathe some welcome fresh air into proceedings whenever they appear on screen. They get some excellent dialogue and some of the more interesting scenes in the story, but are given a stupid finale on the boat at the film's climax that almost puts their good work to shame. It's Charles Gray as the new Blofeld that really takes the cake this time around. Having played the much smaller role of Dicko Henderson in previous Connery entry You Only Live Twice, Shakespearean actor Gray would take on the much larger role of Bond's nemesis, Ernst Stavro Blofeld, this time around, and it's clear that he's no Donald Pleasance or Telly Savalas. This Blofeld taunts Bond with childish remarks, is trying to clone himself in one of the most ridiculous plot points in the series, and even appears in drag to lure Tiffany Case into a trap. His Blofeld is a forgettable villain in the Bond oeuvre, with nothing truly menacing to do with the role, who's left with an open-ended ending that's never really resolved, despite being afforded a mildly intriguing start in the pre-titles. Some trivia now for fact fans. The idea of cloning and captivity for the plot came from Cubby Broccoli's dream about Howard Hughes, which Mankiewicz would incorporate into the script. Jimmy Dean, playing the supremely irritating Willard White, was clearly a character representation of Howard Hughes, and at the time of filming, Dean was actually working for the real Hughes at the Desert Inn Hotel. When the film was in its early drafts, the original script called for Goldfinger's twin brother to be the film's central villain, an idea which was mercifully scrapped quickly. This is also the first of only 2 appearances for a hovercraft as a form of transport in the Bond series. It wouldn't appear again until the lengthier appearance in the pre-title sequence of Die Another Day. Diamonds Are Forever is ultimately a very tonally mixed bag. There are some well-executed single scenes. The car chase in Vegas, with the Bond crew being given permission to close downtown Las Vegas for 5 nights, was logistically one of the most challenging shoots on the early Bond films, and the sequence is a surprisingly good one in the middle of the narrative. And the sequence where Bond almost gets cremated at Morton Slumber's crematorium by Wint and Kidd is another interesting set piece that makes up a stronger first half of the film than second, despite the fact that Bond looks less fazed about the idea of burning alive than he was when he was strapped to the traction table in Thunderball. The sequence itself was one of the very last to be shot for the film on Connery's final day on Diamonds Are Forever and on the official James Bond series itself, Friday the 13th of August 1971. Principal photography on Diamonds wrapped on August the 19th, 1971, when the film would enter post-production, including editing and scoring time for John Barry. Barry provides an entertaining score this time around, definitely one of the film's stronger aspects overall, and the film gets its premiere over the Christmas period in 1971, grossing $116 million worldwide, $43 million of that gross coming from the United States. It turned out that the fans wanted the original 007 back, as the film grossed significantly more than On Her Majesty's Secret Service's $82 million box office. Perhaps surprisingly, Diamonds was also nominated in the Best Sound category at the 1972 Academy Awards, losing out to Fiddler on the Roof. For a lot of ardent Bond fans, this reviewer included, it certainly felt with Diamonds Are Forever that they'd just killed James Bond. Completely gone was the Cold War thriller aspects of the earliest films, replaced by an over-reliance on gadgetry, action scenes with little style or flair, and a flat-out, disinterested 007. After brilliantly setting the groundwork for Bond vs Blofeld in Majesties, Diamonds should have been the series' first true revenge thriller, and it would have been fascinating to see Connery's approach to this. Hell, Lazenby would have been the ideal candidate to finish out that story arc. The next big problem for United Artists and Cubby and Harry was just around the corner, as the race was soon on once again to find the third James Bond. From Crawford-Clark Close-Up. It's sad from our point of view to admit that we're telling you not to bother watching one of the films in the James Bond series, but this really feels like one of the very few occasions where the series really dropped a bomb. Despite being one of the most humorous films in the series and having a sparkling script to boot, Diamonds feels cheesy, laboured, and ultimately a wasted opportunity. That's enough of our thoughts though. Perhaps you rate Diamonds Are Forever higher than us. Let us know your thoughts on the film in the comments below. And as always, if you like this review, don't forget to subscribe to Crawford-Clark Close-Up at the top of the page so you don't miss out on any of our Bond reviews or any of our many other reviews coming soon on the channel. Come and find us on Facebook and Twitter. Just search Crawford-Clark Close-Up and drop us an email with suggestions for future reviews or ways we can improve the channel to crawfordclarkcloseup@gmail.com. James Bond will return with Sean Connery's final foray into the world of 007 in his unofficial outing Never Say Never Again. Plus, we'll be bringing you a separate video giving you our top 5 greatest Connery Bond moments. Look out for both of those reviews very soon. Thanks for watching, and until next time, that's a wrap.